Hi all, welcome to another episode in the Leading Safely podcast. Today I have another fabulous episode for you with special guest Brent Sutton. For those of you who don't know Brent is one of the authors of the book The Practice of Learning Teams, Learning and Improving Safety, Quality and Operational Excellence, with foreword by Dr. Todd Conklin. Brent works in partnership with organisations in the commercial, government and education sector, providing practical advice to address health and safety risks and develop strategies to drive improvements in organisational learning. Brent is well regarded as a safety coach, taking organisations on a learning journey to understand how workers are seen as a solution, how to engage people and leverage their skills so that worker participation becomes a new way of running an organisation, where everybody benefits without replacing an existing health and safety system. Brent is the project architect for New Zealand's most significant court-ordered project order, granted under the Health and Safety at Work Act in New Zealand, which is to develop, train and implement a learning teams framework for the entire maritime industry. Brent also hosts his own weekly podcast series on Safety FM called The Practice of Learning Teams, which you can find at www.learningteamspodcast.com. So, without further ado, let's get into this fun chat with my friend Brent Sutton, all the way from across the ditch in New Zealand. So hi Brent, thanks for taking time out of what I presume to be your chock-a-block day to come and chat with me and for joining the podcast all the way from across the ditch. Hoping the weather in New Zealand isn't too cold at the moment.
Yes, no, maybe. For us. First day of spring.
That's great. It's the first day of spring for us too, so I should be wary that it is the same season. As you know, I've been asking my special guest 3 general questions because I'm really enjoying hearing the different perspectives that I'm getting and the answers so far. So I'm just going to keep on doing them. So let's get into these intriguing questions. My first one to you is, what do you think makes an effective leader when it comes to health and safety?
Look, thank you for that. It's a really fascinating question. It's one I had to reflect on quite a bit. And what I've come up with is being curious. Because being curious allows us as a leader to learn and to reflect. And, you know, when you listen, particularly to people in your team, how you respond really matters. And it's okay that your inner voice may be judgmental, but it's your outer voice that creates the environment to learn and improve rather than to blame and punish. And for leaders, they've got to remember that safety is a journey and not a destination. And having a people walking alongside you on this journey is a really important way to create success and sustainability.
Yeah, it's kind of a nice way of putting things. A gentle way of putting things? Yeah, that's okay. So then what would be your words of wisdom for someone dealing with people who don't want to go along that journey and may not want to change?
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, they have to work out for themselves if they want to change. And I think one of the things that we try and help people in this group, because there's always going to be people in that block, is that we get them to look at safety through the eyes of the worker who face the risk every day. And we get them to ask themselves a simple question: how does that safety system support me in my normal everyday work to be successful? And it's that type of question that really starts to get people to become more curious.
Or critical.
But I think again, if we're trying to shift a person in that way, they need to be able to work out for themselves the value in shifting. And being told to change doesn't do that.
No, that's right. And I can definitely recall, when you first kind of start out in the safety profession, thinking, you go marching out onto site, you think you're going to conquer the world, and then you get that first person that's like, no, I won't change. And you don't really know what to do because in your head, everybody was just going to say yes to all your changes and everything you wanted to implement without kind of taking the time to understand they need to know what's in it for them and what benefit and how is it going to help them.
Absolutely. And remembering that they have probably outlived lots of previous change.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's because I think, I think it's common to Australian and New Zealand companies that they view change as a cycle, whereas a lot of other organisations view change as part of how we sort of focus on continuous improvement. That change is continuous rather than transformational based, which is how we look at change.
Once you're done, as opposed to it going around in a nice circle. Yeah, completely understand.
I would like to think that I'm a different person today as I was 3 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 15 years ago.
Yeah, but that also doesn't mean that you've stopped learning or changing or adapting.
No, my view is adapt or die.
Right, you heard it here first, folks. Adapt or die.
Yeah, not that I'm supporting euthanasia. Yeah,
I can see that on the back of the vehicles already, a bumper sticker. And that's why you're in New Zealand.
Exactly.
I thought all Kiwis were nice. Maybe I'll take it back, hey? Right, so if you could invent something to solve a health and safety issue in the workplace, apart from telling people if they don't adapt, they're going to die, what would it be and why?
Well, I think the first thing is we need to recognise that those that create the risk have the biggest ability to reduce the risk.
Mm-hmm.
And those that face the risk every day, they're dealing with the risk that's left over. And how those people have to cope with that grey space is really important. So finding a better way for workers to be able to share their frontline insights as to how they have to deal and cope with this residual risk would really help them and the organisation to learn and improve.
Okay. What would that look like? A tool, a big fluffy hammer? What would it look like?
No, a way that is natural for people to share their stories. So it may well be some mechanism of capturing that story.
Mm-hmm. But
just touching back on what we spoke about offline earlier about the great work of a chap called Walter A. Sherwin, where he talked about the fact that within the data we collect, there are always signals and lots of noise. And in everyday work, there's lots of signals in the noise that gets lost.
Mm-hmm.
So just as change happens in small steps, how can we see those small steps?
Okay.
Because continuous improvement is actually based on small steps. So at the moment, we wait for an event to happen to now see all those small steps group into a big step. And we react to that by trying to implement a whole lot of big steps. And we wonder why that stuff does not stick over time.
Yeah, it's true. Baby steps are the way to kind of go.
So the true notion of continuous improvement is exactly that. Is actually small steps along the pathway.
That sounds like another bumper sticker, Brent.
Who knows? Yeah.
Maybe that's your next business or your next book. So they're really good insights, I think, and it's kind of you're building a journey there. And I presume that the bigger part of that journey is going down the line of learning teams and learning from events and things as you can in a very organic way. So obviously some of our listeners may or may not be familiar with the concept of learning teams. So perhaps you could share with us, some of your insights around their use, effectiveness, or anything else you might have up your sleeve for us.
Sure. Look, always happy to share with the community. So I think the first thing is, learning teams has become popularised by the work of Dr. Todd Conklin. And he published a book in 2016 called Better Questions. And the premise of learning teams is straightforward. It's to basically say that the people that do the work every day are really the experts in that work. And how can we harness the knowledge that those people have to better understand that gap between work as imagined and work as done? And Todd's work really humanised this notion of being able to look at events when they happen. So rather than investigate, but to look at events when they happen and to treat them as a learning opportunity to improve rather than a blame and punish opportunity. Because you're going to need to choose one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to blame and punish, or we look to learn and improve. And a good example of that is that when we investigate, we place the person in the centre. And we do things like take a statement or interview them. Okay, all we're missing is the bright light and the handcuffs, okay, at that point. Whereas in a learning team, what we do is we get groups of people together. And normally we want people that are quite diverse around the event.
Mm-hmm.
And we basically place the system in the centre. We place the workers around the circle of the system, and we ask them, how did that system support them to be successful?
Mm-hmm.
And by understanding what normal successful work looked like, then it allows that team to move to the event, that day of the event, when it's psychologically safe for them to do that. And a lot of learning comes from that. And I think organisations, one of the biggest problems we face with using things like root cause analysis is that we believe that the system is the only one true way. And we're comparing the only one true way against the actions of an individual. With a learning team, we actually question that system.
Mm-hmm.
Because systems by their nature are degrading from the very moment they go in. So I always say to people, if you were to take your investigation model, if you were to choose one of your best workers, the workers you rely on the most, if you put them through the same investigation, you would find failings. The difference between those good workers that fail, that doesn't lead to an event, versus those workers where it has led to an event, is simply because how those workers have not been able to cope or adapt in that environment.
Okay, it's an interesting.
And we keep showing people every time. But I think the other thing is that in every learning team that I've run, I don't know if you've ever had an investigation where the team has thanked you for investigating them, and they've said, Georgina, can't wait for the next one. Okay.
How do you know what type of investigator I am? I bring muffins and cupcakes. Everyone thanks me. Thank you very much.
For the investigation, there's quite different things.
Of
whereas
course.
in a learning team, people say to us, when can we do more? We've never been listened to in this way.
Mm-hmm.
We've never been able to share these types of stories. That's a learning team.
So they feel like they're being heard, because sometimes I guess the stories they're bringing up may not necessarily be like incident related, but they're definitely related to that work as intended versus work as done.
Absolutely, because the problem is that when we investigate an event, it's difficult for us to see similarities or frequency across other things because it's an event.
Yeah.
And through the nature of hindsight, it becomes obvious as to why it went wrong. So we focus on the what and the why. We don't talk about the how and the when.
Mm.
So with a learning team, we're actually focusing on the how and the when.
Yeah. Well, that
because
makes
the
sense.
what and the why is obvious. And,
Yeah.
Shockingly, a hazard has released energy. Shockingly. Okay? Do you need to investigate the fact that it's released energy? Because it's happened. It's happened.
Yeah.
And it reminds me that the fact is that if we think of this from a risk management perspective, the event has happened for one of four reasons. Either it was a new hazard we had no knowledge of,
Mm-hmm.
which I have to say must be pretty rare these days.
Yeah.
Or two, the event happened because the control wasn't present for the hazard.
Mm-hmm.
Thirdly, it could be that the control wasn't adequate for the event. Or fourthly, is that the event itself exceeded the design limits of the control. That the control was never designed for that type of event to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So all those things could be done from a risk management point of view without any need to ever investigate.
Yeah.
Because an event is a failure of our risk management. But that's why we call them unexpected or unwelcomed, because we didn't want it to happen. What a learning team, though, does, which is actually really interesting, is a learning team shows the organisation whether the system itself actually supports people to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
People are able to clearly articulate the stuff that really matters to them.
Yeah.
And even the bits of safety that we think are compliance, those compliance components can be valuable to workers if they understand their purpose. But when we're in a learning team, what we find out is that it's things that they have to do and they don't really know why.
Yeah.
So a learning team really unpicks or makes the complexity of why things go wrong more visible to us.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas root cause is looking for exactly that. It's looking for the one thing.
Yeah.
I wish there was one thing.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, though, that a lot of the training for safety professionals, a lot of the uni degrees, a lot of the certificate for in workplace health and safety, the investigational component of the certificates and degrees, etc., a lot of it is based around root cause analysis, and find the one or two things that led to the incident or the event occurring. And unfortunately, like you just said, there isn't always one or two things. In fact, most of the time, there's a number of things that led to it, and we're not providing the opportunity for people to, present their stories and actually get to perhaps what it is, those things that did contribute and how to, possibly prevent them. I know we don't like to say prevent reoccurrence because we never want the same thing to happen twice, but to minimize risk and to go down that journey of possibly preventing someone from being harmed because we didn't mitigate that risk appropriately.
Yeah, well, I would say that we should be engaging with people. We should be taking these unwanted or unexpected events as a learning opportunity to strengthen our risk management.
100%. I completely agree with that. Whether you like learning teams or not, you should most definitely see an unexpected or unwanted event as a learning opportunity to put some things in motion to help.
But what a learning team will do is a learning team gives a lot of restorative value to those workers because their faith has been shaken because the event has occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And a learning team provides that restorative element to give that faith back to the workers. And I think that's what people thank us for. That's what they thank us for. Yeah.
Restoring their faith.
We don't give them fancy muffins or cupcakes. We facilitate an experience where they feel that they've been valued and respected and listened to. Yeah.
Look, I think I agree with you, even if, I think that eating my muffins is an experience. That's completely fine.
I'm giving you some brand ones as well to keep you regular. And then...
How do people get involved? Like, if we have listeners right now that are like, hang on, I've been doing it wrong for years, and they want to get on board with, Todd's work and, the work that you're doing around learning teams, how would people start? Where do they go? What do they do to get it?
That's really useful because part of our commitment is to build community. It's not just commercial.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got some great books. You've got Todd's book around better questions and his later books around HOP. You've got the books that we've published around the practice of learning teams themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I questioned before that people don't need to go on a 2-day training course for learning teams. Just taking the book, having a read, understanding what sits behind it. The book was also developed as a way for a person to self-evaluate where they're at in terms of their skills.
Mm-hmm.
And just to try it and reflect on what they've learned. And we then back that up both with our podcast series. So you've got Todd's Create Some Investigation podcast series.
Mm-hmm.
You've got our own one called the Practice of Learning Teams. And also we have a website called Learning Teams Community, where we provide lots of ongoing content and information for people to try. So even those people who love a bit of structure, we've even developed the PDCA model for learning teams. So if you like the structure, you can open up and you can see what the planning bit looks like for learning teams, what the doing bit looks like, what the checking and acting bit looks like.
That's great.
So so if you're not the most natural organic person,
mm-hmm.
then we can give you a little bit of structure to help you on your journey.
Oh, that's great.
Don't have empathy, I don't know how I can help you. Okay.
If you don't have what, sorry?
Empathy. If you don't have empathy, I don't know how I can help you.
Well, that's okay, because about 3 episodes ago, I did do a podcast episode on empathy, so that perhaps they could listen to that, get some skills, retrain or, organically get to that point with a little bit of the touch of empathy, and then perhaps they could read a book and start to go down that journey of learning teams. There's definitely a hype around it and around HOP at the moment as well, so it's...
Yeah, and it's all great stuff. All I say to people is don't think about a learning team as having, I have to have a number of learnings, okay, or what's a good learning or what's a bad learning. What we talk about is, after you run the learning team, think about what did workers learn from this?
Mm-hmm.
What did the organisation learn from this? And as a facilitator, what did I learn from this?
Mm-hmm.
Because learning is learning. There's no such thing as good learning or bad learning, or I didn't meet my threshold of, 5 improvements. We've fallen into this trap that when we investigate that we have to produce corrective actions. Learning does not necessarily have to lead to an improvement. There are many risks out there where simply by running a learning team to better understand the risk is actually the opportunity, rather than trying to fix it. So the whole concept of a learning team is you spend all your time understanding the problem, and if there was a solution, that solution will fall out from the understanding, rather than trying to force the fix.
Yeah, come up with the actions as per the old school version of investigations.
I don't know what learning can come from a corrective action. I'm really puzzled. I mean, I think we talked, previously, my daughter's 16. I don't know what learning she'll get if I try and correctly action her every 5 minutes.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah, so we need to treat people as the knowledge holders themselves,
mm-hmm.
and respect that. And by workers learning themselves, that learning will lead to self-improvement. Yeah. And that's what we see. We see that self-improvement. Yeah.
That's great.
Not necessarily the system. The system needs to improve because the system needs to, be more resilient.
Yeah, and adapt. Yeah.
But you're shocked at how people learn and how they change. And on our podcast show, there's an interesting podcast from Chevron, and they talked about the fact that they had workers come to them saying how learning team changed their own personal lives.
Okay.
Because in the learning team, it allowed them to reflect, and reflection was not part of what they did in their everyday life.
Nor is it part of standard investigational process, per ICAM, per essential factors, per root cause, taproot, Ishikawa, whatever you want to call it. Like, there is no section where it says, okay, little person, could you please have a look back through and reflect on your time doing X, Y, Z, and why do you think that happened to you? Like, there's no part of that.
No, yet if we think about, for instance, Kaizen, we think about Lean, we think about Toyota, all those people say the same thing. The value is in the reflection, not in the process.
Yeah. Much to think about, hey?
Hey, that's okay. And, even my own journey, I've been practicing mindfulness for about the last 7 years.
Oh, that's great.
Mindfulness is a reflective practice.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't come across as that sort of person with sort of gongs or bells or scented candles.
I think that's the commercialized part of mindfulness, though. I think it's a much deeper kind of thing to take on board rather than it's like everything. There's always that face that you see in the shopping center, and then when you take something home and unwrap it, there is the item itself. And I think, there's a lot of things like that, unfortunately, that you really need to scratch the surface and dig a little deeper to get to what's underneath.
Absolutely. So I think there's a close link between learning teams and that mindfulness element for those that participate.
Good to know. And I think that our listeners have definitely learned, I guess, something new and something they didn't know potentially from, listening to this podcast. So it's been great having you here and having you on the journey. I'm just going to double check that I haven't cut you off midway through. Anything else you wanted to share with our listeners?
No, look, it's been a great experience. And once again, I wish you all the best on your own journey with your podcast show.
Thank you.
Growing your people is important, and always keen to support organisations and people that want to grow community. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Brent. That's perfect.
So there it is, my fun chat with Brent around the concept of learning teams, change management, and so much more, really. Hopefully you got some great insight from this episode, or it has at least piqued your interest in the theories of HOP or learning teams. Don't forget, if you have any feedback for me, or if you would like to suggest a topic for a podcast episode, or you would just like to reach out and say hi, you can do so directly via LinkedIn or by emailing me via leadingsafely@outlook.com. Until next time, stay safe.